a proud member of the Earglue Media family of podcasts.
And welcome to the Film Appraisers, the podcast that evaluates your favorite films. Each episode, we discuss a film brought to us by a guest or a listener, and we appraise it in each of the following categories: narrative, music, technique, uniqueness, and longevity. Each category can receive a maximum of $20,000 for a possible $100,000 for the most valuable film, and then we see where this thing stands next to the classics and other films brought to us by guests or listeners. My name is Josh, and today we get to discuss one of my all-time favorite films. It's from the master, Stanley Kubrick. It stars Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, and Danny Lloyd. It is the 1980 horror classic, The Shining. So this is episode 34, Axe, Jack, and Tony. So with me today is your senior appraiser, the little boy. Man, I tried to do this intro, Joe, and I even practiced it a few times just so I wouldn't mess it up. But it's so ridiculous. With me is your senior appraiser, the little boy that lives in my mouth, Joe King.
Hi, Josh.
Yeah. How do you respond to that, right?
I don't even know.
It sounded a lot better in my head, actually. It sounded
Perfect.
a lot better.
I thought it was perfect.
So what about Todd? Do you have him there with you today? Is he with us? Joe? Is Todd with you today, Joe?
Todd isn't here, Josh.
I shouldn't have turned the video feed on because I just saw you do the little finger with.
You can't do it without the finger, man.
Yeah, try to say Danny isn't here, Mrs. Torrance, without doing the finger. It's impossible. You're right. Well, no matter. That's Todd's loss. What I do want to do, Joe, is I want to give a shout out to our new patrons, our new patrons, whatever we want to call them. We've got a couple new ones. One, we've got Michael. He's actually in our Discord, Uthal for maybe not long or maybe not that long, something like that. Coincidentally, Michael, he's going to get mentioned later on in this show. You know, they just pure coincidence that we're going to talk about something he mentioned in Discord when we get to the end of this episode. Now, how's that for foreshadowing, just like The Shining?
Very appropriate.
We also have a new patron from earlier this week. Our buddy Jonesy over at the Cantina Cast has signed up. So Michael, Jonesy, guys, we appreciate that very much. Definitely looking forward to your feedback on the things we're doing. And welcome aboard.
You're now part of a very exclusive club.
Very exclusive. In fact,
very, very exclusive.
If anybody else is interested in becoming a patron like Michael and Jonesy, just head over to patreon.com/filmappraisers. You can select from a few tiers that we have available. You have access to a lot of bonus coverage, like the coverage of South by Southwest Film Fest that we released to our subscribers here recently. But you also get to access the after show, which immediately follows this main coverage here. Format for that's a little bit more unscripted and loose. I really do look forward to recording those. I like it, and we hope you guys do too.
The after show is a bunch of fun. I get to be totally myself. Well, a little bit less, not entirely, a little bit filtered, but pretty close.
It's a filter with a lot of holes in it, though. Really,
it's a lot of holes in it. Yeah, just like me.
Nice. Why did I pick The Shining? Apparently, I didn't get enough of the themes of isolation after having spent 4 days at the South by Film Festival, which we discussed, like I said, in our Patreon exclusive. The isolation theme overwhelmingly dominated a lot of those shorts and features from that festival.
Apparently, it wasn't enough for you, though. Apparently, you needed more isolation in your life.
Jeez.
The last year and South by Southwest didn't quite give you your fill, so here we are.
Next movie's the Care Bear movie is what we're going to do.
We're going to do Castaway next.
Yeah, there you go. But I kind of kid, but The Shining really is one of my favorites. It's one of my favorites for a lot of reasons. I mean, first, it's Kubrick, right? I mean, he's great for a reason, and I think it will be proven in this episode. And we get Jack Nicholson in his prime. Man, I am a big fan of his work, not because he and I have the same pointy eyebrows, but just because he's a supremely talented actor, and he's in a lot of my favorite films.
But even in his prime, his hairline still sucks.
It never changed, really.
No, it's like the same on its way out hairline that's been forever.
It's like Sean Connery. He's always looked old. Always.
Yeah, exactly.
But I really like this film because it's just so layered. And you continually find new things. And I'm not talking about the typical, hey, I never noticed that before. That comes with a lot of films, almost every film. This has secrets and Easter eggs and things like that, which are intentionally set somewhere in a scene or someone says something that you never realized foreshadows the narrative. I think just overall, it's just a great film. So let's take a look at the log line from IMDb. It reads, a family heads to an isolated hotel for the winter where a sinister presence influences the father into violence while his psychic son sees horrific forebodings from both past and future. Joe, I'll be honest, I got a lot of notes for this discussion on the categories that we use to rank films. And if we don't get to those, I've got a feeling we could be a 2-hour episode easily. But I did want to have a quick conversation about your experience with this film, because I remember in our last episode, you mentioned you've seen a lot of The Shining, but only in bits. Was this your first time to do a proper watch, to really sit down from start to finish?
Yeah, this was definitely my first all the way through watch. I think at one point I watched like the last 2/3, but it was on like TBS or something.
Yeah.
So it was leaving some stuff out. There was no terrifying old lady in the bathtub
yeah,
scene.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, so this was my first unadulterated version or watch through of the film. I really liked it, right? I mean, obviously it's like a required viewing classic for a reason, right?
Yeah.
It's like one that always comes up, and we'll talk about this when we get to like longevity and whatnot, but like, you can't get this far in life without knowing here's Johnny and that scene, and I mean, there's a bunch of stuff in this, right? But just knowing that stuff doesn't do the film justice, right?
Yeah.
It's really great. I think we're gonna like different parts of it.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of have an idea of what the things you might think are the best parts of this are. And I think I have an idea of what I think the best parts of this are, and I don't think they're the same thing.
That's good. That should take it up to 100,000 then.
I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't think that's going to be the case. But I think it's going to do well, though. I mean, I know my scores, and I think it's going to do pretty well. But yeah, and I think maybe we'll get more into this later, or maybe even in the after show. I think this is a kind of film that doesn't exist anymore so much.
Yeah.
And it is nice to go back to these.
Yeah. Yeah, to really go back and appreciate a film like this even getting made, really.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
All right, well, let's jump into it, because I like I said, I've got a lot in my notes. And let's first talk about narrative. And I want to remind our listeners, narrative is a category that we consider story and plot, right? Two different things. We talk about costumes, or we could. They have the potential to talk about costumes, setting. Specifically, we'll talk about the acting. And I guess let's go ahead and jump off there. And since, Joe, this was your first time, I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say about narrative. So why don't you kick us off with that category?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is interior design in the late 70s was terrible. Was just horrendous. There's way too much gold and green in this film. Right?
There's a gold room in there, right?
There's a gold room. I'm actually watching him sitting in the gold room right now, and it is so tacky.
Yeah, that's great. Just out of curiosity, where are you at in the film? For those of you who don't know, Joe and I usually have the film playing on separate monitors as we talk. Where are you at right now?
Right now, she is telling him that a crazy old woman tried to strangle Danny.
Okay, well, I am at 1 hour and 12 minutes, so we are just now walking into the room 237. We're getting that point of view, so I just left that scene.
So we're very close.
Very close.
Very close. So narrative-wise, I'm kind of all over the place on this. Nicholson is a force to be reckoned with. He is so amazing he's amazing in everything. Yeah. But there are scenes in this where he conveys madness in a way that I was deeply uncomfortable watching.
Yeah.
Like, he really nails it.
He's convincing as a bit of an unlikable person from the beginning.
Yes,
which
absolutely.
makes it more believable that he'd actually turn in the hotel, in the Overlook Hotel.
I do think the turn could have used like one more step in it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Now, it felt more complete the couple of times that I watched it in succession. I did pay attention to that because I felt the same way for years that this happened so fast. But they do put gaps in between the title cards of which day it is, so that helps a little bit with just time. But there are stretches this last couple of viewings that I noticed it felt a little longer, but that's probably because I'm not picking up on the other stuff. Like I've already seen a lot of the other things. I'm not paying attention to it. I'm focusing on certain things. I think it might get better with viewings.
I could see that. I think in my head, they lay on him being kind of a jerk so much that maybe there's not a big enough differentiator between like step 1 and step 2 of his plummet into madness there or something, because he starts off where he is. Maybe they could have put an extra step in or made a little more clear. Or honestly, and this goes down to I haven't read the book or anything, so I don't know where this fault lands, but maybe they could have made this last, a month instead of a week or something, and it would have just felt a little more organic there. This is a nitpick, right? This is just now Nicholson, amazing. I wrote in my notes, Nicholson is really something, and so are his eyebrows.
You mean my eyebrows?
Those eyebrows. He really moves those things, dude.
He does. Yeah, he really does.
I was unimpressed with Shelley Duvall.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say she was terrible or anything like that.
Yeah.
She was just fine. Although I will say, and this is not meant to be mean, but it's probably going to sound mean. There's something about everything she's ever been in, about the way she talks, combined with the way she moves, that has always kind of creeped me out a little bit. Just kind of, she's got this like presence about her that is like ethereal-ish, I guess, maybe, in a way that I find a little creepy.
I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean with Shelley Duvall.
But I didn't think her acting was very good. I thought like a lot of her lines were delivered like she was reading a cue card or something, or like, and this could be, we've talked about this before too. Sometimes when you are playing off against somebody who is amazing, it shines the light so bright that
shines.
Shines, yes. The light so bright that your mistakes stand out more.
Yeah.
Right. So there could have been that.
I think with her, what I've come to conclude with her is that she's a good actress, right? Well, we know she's a good actress. I mean, you look at her like in Annie Hall or Nashville, a lot of that stuff she did with Robert Altman. She's good in it. She's really good. But in this one, I agree. There was something off. And I agree. I don't think it's bad acting, but I'm wondering if it's just too real. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like when you hear people do things in commercials, right? And they fluctuate within the certain time of the commercial, like things like that. I wonder if she's just talking to people like you would talk to people in the real world, in an actual real setting. And I don't know if that translates, like you said, to the style everybody else is giving in this movie. So again, I don't think it's bad. I think the point that I'm trying to make is that maybe it's just her acting style pulls some from this narrative compared to the other actors in the film, which is what you don't want anyway. It doesn't matter. You never want to get pulled from the story. So if it's good or bad, indifferent, doesn't matter. It pulled you from her acting pulled you from the story, which is not good.
Yeah. The other thing too, which I think is more of probably lands more on editing, maybe a little bit on direction. There's a choice. There's a thing it does, and this is a thing that drives me nuts in video games too. Which was a super common thing in like JRPG cutscenes and stuff, where there's like a little bit longer of a pause between lines than is natural.
Yeah.
There are parts where Nicholson will say a line, or actually there was a part that really stood out to me. I can't remember what the line was, when they first get to the hotel and they're taking like their tour, where somebody, I think it was the head chef there, asks Shelley Duvall a question, and there's like it's not like an emotional moment or anything. It's just a question, and there's like a weird pause, almost like they used two cuts to do it, and they didn't cut enough off the front of one of them. It's just a hair longer than you would expect it to be, and it feels unnatural. Yeah. Again, we're talking nitpicks here. This is not going to do poorly, right?
Right. Yeah. This is just all centered on Shelley Duvall right now.
Yeah, we're just picking her apart as much as possible.
I do like her though. I'll talk about it. I do.
I really do. I know. But actually, it's not just her. That like weird pause thing. I noticed that a few times in the film, and I think that's probably maybe a little bit of the vintage of the film and maybe a little bit of the style of the era. But it's something I'm not a big fan of. And maybe this is also because in my working time and whatnot, like working out and stuff lately, I've been re-binging through The West Wing, and that's a very fast dialogue Aaron Sorkin thing, and maybe I'm just used to like snappy dialogue, and it's standing out more than normal, which totally possible because that is a snappy dialogue kind of thing. But it wasn't bad, right? That's not a horrendously terrible thing. That's just a thing I noticed. See, what else do I have here? I had the turn for Jack a little quick, like we talked about that. The story is really well executed, and it's a fairly compelling isolation, stranded, off the grid kind of story, right? But it's fairly standard, and I think the way the story is told is considerably more compelling than the story itself. Yeah. You know, like this is not the first or the last stranded story. This is not the first or last cabin fever.
Yeah, cabin in the woods kind of movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of these like
cabin in the woods. There's a monster in the house.
Right. Yeah. Right. This is another one of those. But the way it's told, specifically some of the things that Kubrick did and some of the cinematography really goes a real long way in this. I think for me, a lot of those points landed in technique though. Yeah. Because of the decisions, the way those decisions were made. And not so much in narrative. So I think because of that, narrative falls a little bit for me. I think it's still way above average, but I had narrative in at 16.
I'm a little higher. I'm at 17.5, I think. Do I even know where I am? I am at.
You're
17.
So confident in your in your previous work, Josh.
Here it is in my notes, right here in 14 size font. I'm at 17.5. Where it comes to narrative, I had a couple more things. So I wrote the same things that you mentioned with Shelley Duvall and Jack Nicholson. Jack gets a lot of long opportunities to prove those acting skills too. A lot of time in front of the camera with some continuous shots. You know, the scene where he's following Wendy up the stairs just before she hits him in the head with the bat, the camera just lingers on him, and you really can see how I was almost said him shine. You get the scene where he's locked.
It's going to be hard to avoid that because that's a word we use a lot, and we're going to have to not use it. You know what the shot for me with him was?
This is in the dry goods room.
Yes, looking up at him from underneath.
Yeah, absolutely.
That shot. I mean, I put that shot under technique, but man, the look on his face.
Well, both of them. Both when he's talking with Wendy in the dry goods room, while he's still a little bit hysterical.
Yep.
And then when Grady comes later to let him out, even that's good because he's like a whipped dog at that point, and it's the complete change in his acting. It's just really good. I mean, you watch Jack Nicholson in those scenes, and you're seeing a legend in his prime doing some very challenging acting, and he just pulls it off wonderfully. It's really well done.
He flips like a switch like 10 times in this film, and it's so impressive to watch him just turn it on, right? Just hit full speed from a practical standstill. Yeah. You know, he'll have like a little bit of a menace in his voice. He'll be, but it'll be a relatively calm conversation with a little bit of menace. And then next thing you know, he's stomping down the hallway, throwing silverware across the room and stuff, right? He just goes crazy. And the way he walks down the hallway, I'm trying to remember, which scene it is, but he's walking down the hallway and he's just like punching the air and like kicking his legs out and like just like having a moment.
He's having
that actually reminded me of this is a bad thing to say. I'm sorry, but it reminded me of the first Tim Burton Batman, or the when he was Joker and he was like doing a lot of that like wild body movement.
All right. That's good. Yeah, it's a good comparison. I did have a couple of other things, in particular with the costumes. Those costumes, I think they show well for the period without looking forced for the 80s. We've talked about that before. But the color palette, to me, just drives home the story, particularly the choice of the colors. So the name of the game from here on out for me is foreshadowing. And I think Stanley Kubrick does it like nobody else in this particular film. You get the green at the beginning of the film for a lot of Jack's clothes. And then you get red from his jacket after his nightmare. So the green being more tame and then the red being the violence. But Jack's red is way different than Wendy's and Danny's. The red that Wendy and Danny wear are really saturated. Like they're real saturated, fun, bright colors. But the red that Jack wears is not. The value on that color is really decreased and the color looks worn. And that's an indication of where we're headed in this film. One of my favorite uses of foreshadowing with the clothes in this film is with Jack's tie. During the interview with Mr. Ullman, you can see that the tie is not only the same color, but it's a very similar pattern to the maze that plays an important role as we conclude the film. So I thought there was a lot in the costumes, very smart and particular choices that Kubrick made in order to tell this story, or in order to tell you this story, to tell you exactly where we're headed without telling you exactly where we're headed, which, right, that's foreshadowing. And the foreshadowing continues into the story and the plot as it should. I mean, that's where you would expect that it would be heavy, and it really is. So, I mean, just a few, and I mean that, just a few instances in this film that always stand out to me that I think are really cool with the story. When Danny is talking with Halloran, when he asks Halloran, "Are you scared of this place?" Immediately over Danny's head through the whole scene are these knives, and they're kind of oddly placed. They're in the kitchen, but they're real oddly placed for, kitchen knives, but they are right over Danny's head, coming down like in a stabbing motion. I always thought that was really cool. One that I only noticed probably the last, 3 or 4 viewings over the years was the doll that was laid out. So there's a scene where Jack's throwing the ball against the walls and he's throwing the ball down the hallway. There are toys scattered about, but there's a doll. It's like a dark-skinned doll laying in the floor. And that's exact same position in the same location that Halloran lands in when Jack kills him at the end of the film. I always think that's really cool. And there's a ton of little ones, like when Wendy is chasing Danny as they're about to head into the maze. Of course, she's in her red coat, but she's saying things like, "I'm going to get you. You better run fast. Look out. Here I come." And it's kind of foreshadowing Jack and Danny's chase at the end of the film. He does the same thing. Or when Wendy talks about the beginning of the film, I'll have to leave a trail of breadcrumbs to find my way out. It's a similar manner to the end of the film when Jack and Danny are in the maze using footprints to both follow and hide their paths from each other. I'm not going to lie to you. If you go out there and start looking for these kinds of things online, there are a lot of little ones that they're pretty far-fetched. I mean, we'll get to some of these theories when we talk in the after show, but one that I had heard that I'm starting to lean towards is some say that the twins are foreshadowed when Jack is being given a tour of the hotel. So 3 times there's a pair of women with luggage past Jack while he's on that tour. And 2 of those pair say something to Mr. Ullman like, goodbye or have a good winter or whatever. But they're always shown in pairs. Like the women are always shown in pairs when they show up. Okay, maybe that's something there. Maybe there's not, but maybe there is. But what I like about the foreshadowing of this whole story is that it parallels like Danny's experiences. It's really smart. He sees these paranormal psychic things all over the hotel that nobody else notices. And like us, we're seeing these things all over the hotel that to the characters go unnoticed. So it's kind of like foreshadowing what's coming. They can't see it. We can see it. It's kind of cool that way. So some of those additional things had me a little higher. I was at 17.5. 1500's not that far apart. I'm cool. We usually split when we're 1,000 apart. I'm cool with splitting this one too. I'd come down a little bit. I might be a little high just how much I like this film. So I'm cool to come down a little bit on that one. I think we're close.
Yeah, I think the middle is a pretty good spot on that. But one of the things you mentioned with the foreshadowing, with all the theories, it's funny. It made me think, if there's like a runaway effect on doing a good job with some of this stuff, if you do enough smart foreshadowing, and I think that the bar is actually probably fairly low to get this started, people will go back and find every little thing that you didn't mean to be foreshadowing,
that's right,
and find a way to make it foreshadowing. And you end up with these lists that are like 9,000 things. I mean, and it's not just foreshadowing. It's
the theories and all that
stuff. If you do enough smart, just enough smart when you're making a film, or actually it's any media, writing a book, a film, a video game, anything like that, you do just enough to get people to think you're smart, they will go back and find every little thing they can to play into that narrative. And that's my favorite part of reading some of these super far-fetched. I mean, actually, we know this more than anybody as being part of like the Star Wars community. It's like the ultimate version of this, where every little thing has to be part of some grand plan.
Yep. Yeah, when really a lot of times it's like, well, the prop guy needed to leave early because he had to pick up his kids, so he just threw that on the ground. You know?
If you ever watch any like in-depth documentaries on a single film being made, and how often like a prop was like thrown together out of like whatever they could find last minute because the original prop didn't look right or something. They're like, oh crap, grab this shaver and paint it. And then somebody later on is like, well, you see, this thing is this color because of this and this. And you're like, actually, that's just left over.
There's 6 letters in the word, like stuff like that.
Yeah.
This film is a classic example of people doing that too. And I think what's probably the reason is because Kubrick's so smart, and he does put those little things in there, and they just think, well, it's Kubrick. He's going to have all this stuff about...
You put 2 or 3 of those in, and then people will find 400 you didn't mean to do, right?
Yeah. Okay, right, let's go with 16,750. Is my math right? Yeah.
I think that's math. I think that's how math works.
It's been so long. All right, let's talk about music. I'm just going to roll into music and talk about the foreshadowing. I'm just going to continue the conversation. Like the foreshadowing we just talked about, the score also does this in a few ways. I'll give some examples. When Danny's on the tricycle, we have a song playing. It brings a very distinct sound in the score. Just as he notices room 237, it's like kind of like a high squeal kind of thing they put in there. We hear that for the first time when he notices room 237. So it's kind of foreshadowing a little bit of what's going to happen with that room. And then when Danny's riding on the tricycle, the one that I really like is that the score gives us cues on what we're about to see around the corner when he sees the twins. When he sees the twins in the hallway for the first time, when he's riding his tricycle, not when he sees them the first time, but when he sees them the first time in the hallway. If you watch that scene again, the music is building as we're following him, and then you actually get the payoff of the music before he turns the corner. You hear the drums pound, and then it's maybe a second and a half of him turning the corner, and boom, the twins are standing right there. I really like that, because usually you don't do that. Usually it's more of what we talk about in the Mickey Mousing. You see something, they play it. So it does it a little bit ahead of time. It's real obvious when you catch it. I feel like we get some foreshadowing from the opening song too, because it's an odd opening song with the helicopter shot and everything. And it's just a boom, boom, boom. And it's just, I feel like it just hits you right in the face right from the beginning. It's like, hey, get ready. This thing's coming at you. So I don't know if there's anything there, but I felt that. At least that's where I was looking at. The original music that they used, man, they made it creepy. So that song, Midnight, the Stars and You, the dun, 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 the one that plays in the gold room, that song has lasted in my head as being so creepy. It's like the same thing that happens when I hear Stuck in the Middle with You from Reservoir Dogs. Like I think if I hear, it's not like I'm hearing Midnight, the Stars and You on the radio, but if I ever hear that song, immediately it invokes The Shining, and that'll never go away. What I like about that song, though, this is really cool. What I like about the use of that song, Midnight, the Stars, and You, is how Stanley Kubrick uses it in the story as both diegetic and non-diegetic. We've talked about this before. So diegetic, actually in the film, the people are hearing it. So maybe it's on a radio or maybe a record player is playing. And then non-diegetic, it's a score that's playing, right? It's trying to push along the story and make you feel a certain way, and the characters don't hear these noises and sounds and music. So when we first hear it, the song, as Jack's walking into the gold room, Jack Torrance is experiencing that. There's an actual party going on, and the band is playing that song. So he's hearing that. But as we get further into the film, we finally figure out that none of that was all there. That was all in Jack's head. And now what we thought was diegetic now instantly becomes non-diegetic, and nothing changed. I just thought that's really cool how that happens. It's just real interesting. It's a little deep, but it's really interesting. I just really like that about it. They did do a good job establishing what's called a leitmotif. So L-E-I-T motif, not L-I-G-H-T. So a leitmotif. Everybody knows what that is, even though you might not know what it is. It's a musical theme associated with a character or place or thing. So think about Imperial March. Every time you see Vader, what do you hear? Right? Or every time you see Jaws is coming, what do you hear? That's the leitmotif. And in The Shining, it is that prolonged screech, and then those deep horns that kind of come in that accompany when Danny is either shining or when a ghost shows up. It's that real high screech, and then the horns come in. I like how they use that. We get a little bit of a similar music style to that leitmotif when we first see Jack in the large room just before Wendy walks up and he goes off on her. You don't know it at first, but he's typing the all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, meaning he's already started to snap, right? So we get that theme that's playing, or we get that song that's playing that's a little similar to the leitmotif, and we know that he's starting to turn. At least now we do. And that's partly from the musical cues. There's not going to be a song, though. And I think this is what this category probably, let's say, loses the most points. It's not losing points. It's just not going to get it up to that 17,000 to 20,000 range. There's not going to be a song here that transcends the film into culture. I mean, maybe the opening track. I've seen it spoofed before. Like, I know the Simpsons have done it, but they've done everything. So, but it's not going to be in that walk up to somebody and hum it and they know what you're talking about. So I'm just rewarding it slightly above the 15,000 mark. Not much, but I'm at 16,000 for music.
So I'm not far off. You covered a lot of what I have here. There's another thing here, and this is going to be the first time I mention it, but it's going to come up a bunch in technique and in uniqueness too. And it is Kubrick's use of mirrored, like not just mirrors, but mirrored sounds and visuals and themes or people to create really uneasy feelings throughout the film. And it starts with the music. He does a lot of stuff with the music where it's not, when I say mirrored, I don't necessarily mean it is the opposite waveform and that kind of mirrored, but where you get a scene or person, like you said, you like the light themes, right? Where you get a theme or person in one part where song plays, whatever, you get this, or the sound or the song plays, and where it might feel, that's what I'm looking for. I am forgetting a word in the English language right now in a way that is really
is it
hard.
Shine?
It might be shine. Shine might be the word. So right, you get, so Jack, right? We see kind of multiple versions of him in his head, and then again the picture of him on the wall at the end, right? You get kind of multiple versions of him, and they kind of clue into this like mirrored universe. And all of a sudden I'm in Star Trek, right? With some of the music, right? And it's really smartly used with those mirrored versions of him and the music played to try to also foreshadowing or giving you hints that way. And I found it very effective. They also do a really great job with letting you know how creepy something is going to be with the music before, like like you mentioned, the opening shot, right? With that possibly being foreshadowing. Like, I don't know that you could necessarily say it isn't. It might be a different way than you are thinking, but that opening song is for sure creepy, and it's right, and then the movie hasn't even started yet. Right?
Yeah. The Warner Brother logo is up, and the second it goes down, it's burn, burn, and like it just goes right.
That opening scene, also that helicopter shot, also immediately gave me the same vibes as the Evil Dead opening.
Yeah, it's a very fair.
It's a little different, but I get the same vibe out of it.
I know what you mean. It's in that realm. That's right.
Like kind of uneasy. Because it's not just a helicopter shot. The motion is also kind of tracked.
It's kind
strangely.
of weaving side to side.
Right, exactly. But you kind of hit most of my notes here. I'm trying to read through my notes and make sure I don't miss anything that you didn't already get.
Sorry about that.
So it was really effective. I found largely it was complementary to the scene. I do think, and I know that they were going for like you mentioned, the Imperial March there. But some of that I could have done with a little bit less of the shrill screeching. I was getting a little tired of listening to that.
It's the same one over and over, yeah.
Over and over, and for long stretches sometimes, like long stretches. And I thought that maybe that could have been a little more sparingly used.
Do you think that was intentional, though? Do you think that it was overextended to just make, not do anything more than just make you uncomfortable? Not make you uncomfortable like, I don't want to be here, but just like, stop. Like putting you in a mood you don't want to be in.
I think that may have been the intention, but what the effect was me thinking about how much I don't like the sound and not about the movie.
There you go. That's not effective. Yeah.
Right. That did not land the way it would have been intended if that was the intention. So like that definitely hit me a little bit. And other than that, I mean, I guess maybe if I watched it a bunch, it would sit with me, but there's nothing in the music in this that I would ever call back to. Like there's no standout song, nothing I'm going to listen to on its own. There's like, I would probably recognize a couple of the songs if I heard them just out and about now.
Yeah.
But it might take me a few seconds to figure out what I recognize them from.
It's a great soundtrack to put on Halloween when you're just setting a mood. Like we listen to Stranger Things soundtrack and the Halloween soundtrack on Halloween, like as we do trick-or-treating with the kids.
That actually makes me feel worse about it because now I feel like it's novelty.
But forget everything I just said. Strike. The jury needs to strike that from.
But I was overall pretty high on it. I really dug some of like the synthy atmospheric score parts that were going on when things weren't necessarily being creepy. There were definitely parts of this where the music was just kind of like setting moods that weren't necessarily all creep all the time to give you a little relief from the creep here and there. I liked some of that, and I did like a lot of the stuff that they played. I liked a lot of I liked that opening song. I liked some of the, I don't know what any of them are called. I did a bad job learning all the names, but I did like a lot of it. But I came in a little below you, but just barely. I came in at 15 on music. And like I said, largely it's just because it's just kind of...
It just does what it does and doesn't do anything more.
Effective and kind of unmemorable. And then maybe I was 1,000 lower because the screeching kept taking me out of the film.
All right, let's call it what? 15,500? Gosh, my math is on point today.
Yeah, you're killing it. You got a scholar over here.
Goodness. All right, I stole a lot of your stuff. I'll let you start my favorite category. All right. We'll let you kick that one off.
I'm going to blow through some of this and then leave you probably 4 pages that you've got there.
It's page and a half.
I've got about 3/4 of a page. So you've outdone me again, Josh. So technique here, I think this is a big one for how the story is told. They do a great job with setting the mood with the camera.
You're so reading my notes. My very first note is good use to help establish a mood.
Yeah, I want to take everything you've got. There's a ton of scenes that do it, right? There's all kinds of stuff. I mean, at the beginning of the movie, I was actually getting like, at the very beginning, I was starting to have a moment where I was like, man, is this thing all... Because the beginning, there's all that dialogue about Danny.
Mm-hmm.
And for the first part of that dialogue, all we get is center frame whoever's talking.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, is this movie all going to be medium length, center frame?
Hey, Kubrick loves it. He and Wes Anderson are the two that want symmetry. Like, I've even seen behind the scenes footage of him flipping out because he can't get something centered on the crosshairs of the eyepiece of the camera. I mean, he likes his symmetry and his center.
And, right.
Really,
and so
really
there's
funny.
an interesting thing to that here too. So, but then they start getting into some dynamic shots. Actually, partway through that conversation, we start getting some over the shoulder shots and then some slightly further away shots. And we start getting something that's not just somebody talking kind of directly into the camera. Right.
Yeah.
And it just expands from there. We get, well, I mean, we already talked about that fly-in opening shot. I actually really like that shot.
Yeah.
And then we get, there's a great dynamic shot when Shelley Duvall there is bringing breakfast to Jack, and the camera swings in from behind the pillars and then looks down the hallway at her from behind.
It's a lot like the Rocky shot, right?
Yeah,
when she brings in, you get the mirror shot, and it zooms in on the mirror, and you see just Jack. I'm sorry, it's zoomed out. Yeah, it zooms in. Yeah. No, sorry, opposite. It's zoomed in. It zooms out when she walks in with the breakfast tray, and then it zooms back into the mirror, and it looks just like a normal shot again. It's really well done. Really,
there's a ton of mirrored shots, which again starts to fit into some of this mirror imagery. Mirror imagery. Man, that's not one word, but I made it one. I made that one word. Mirror imagery that he goes for here. There's that great shot. I thought it was a great shot with, like, there's a bunch of them with the camera following right behind Danny on the little bike.
Yeah.
I liked a lot of those. Yeah. There was one part, the first scene with him, the bike makes significantly more noise than it does the rest of the movie, right?
Everybody picks that up. And that was one of the other things I mentioned in my notes about establishing a mood. The sounds of that big wheel going from carpet to hardwood to carpet to hardwood, that's intentional. Everybody catches that. And people remember that. When you ask them about it, they're like, oh man, him riding on that carpet and the hardwood, it just puts you in a certain mood. And it's just really smart. Really smart.
I am going to nitpick that though a little bit. Just a little bit. Because I love that scene. I just said I liked it a lot. The wheels hitting the hardwood and the noise amplifying are not in sync.
Yeah, that's true. It's got like the age sync of sound issue kind of thing going on. Yeah,
it like I noticed that like the second carpet to hardwood transition, and I was like, oh god, I'm going to notice this every time he goes over hardwood now. And then the rest of the movie he doesn't make that noise anymore. And I'm like,
so maybe it's foreshadowing. No, I'm just kidding. That's the level when we talk about these theories in the after show. That's the level people come up with. It's like, well, this picture was tilted slightly 30 degrees, and if you take 30, and you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, nobody spends that much time on a film. Not one person. There's a great shot where the camera starts in tight on the centered typewriter, and then it zooms back and pans up while he's throwing the ball against the wall. That's a great shot. I like that a lot. I love the shot, actually, like, I think it's right after that, I think, where he's looking at the hedge maze model, and then the aerial shot turns into the actual hedge maze.
Yeah.
It's a good shot. I like that. It's a nice transition. There's a lot of imagery in this, and this actually played a little bit in uniqueness for me too. There's a lot of stuff done very subtly to make you feel uneasy. There are a lot of super symmetrical patterns used in the background on things, not only in the way the camera is framed, but also in what they're putting in the scene behind, or where they're placing somebody in front of something or whatever. There are parts where, like you mentioned, how much Kubrick loves to have things centered, right? And there are a couple of shots where they take great care to make sure the subject is centered, but something in the pattern is off a little bit behind them to make you feel uneasy. It's this like this.
Hey, can you please put that back in its right place?
Yes, exactly.
Feel like you get in your butt. Yeah.
Yes, it's like this uncanny discomfort that is put in intentionally all over the place. And I honestly think without that stuff kind of in every scene, the film loses a huge amount of the tension it has, right? And I think there's a great deal put into how things are framed that way. And there's like the first shot of the room 237 door up from the floor through Danny's arms on the bike.
Mm-hmm.
That's another great one that like framed 237 in the shadowy outline of the bike and his arm.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I mean, really great. And then the other thing that you see a lot of here is these really slow zooms in or zooms out to make you feel uneasy. And it's all very effective. And I thought it was really great.
And it's also effortless too. It's not it's not like the filmmaker's trying hard to force all these styles in. It just feels effortless. Like this is just the natural progression of the story.
They're all subtle. There's nothing ham-fisted or blatant. A lot of stuff is just very subtly done and very carefully chosen. And I feel like that's why it's effective.
Yeah.
If it was really blatantly obvious, then it probably wouldn't land because you would be distracted by it. Mm-hmm. But it's so subtle that it gets you. There's a million examples of all this stuff. I'm sure you've got twice as many notes about twice as many things. And I know you're just itching. I can tell in the tone of your voice, you're ready to go.
I'm crossing out the stuff you already talked about. So mine will be a little bit shorter.
But I came in at 18 and I was really impressed overall with technique on this one.
I think you're a genius coming up with 18, to be honest with you, because you
had 18 too, 18.
Right? Right. You talked about a lot.
That's the only time you ever flatter me, by the way, is when I agree with you.
Or when I want something. Or be fair.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, we talked about the sound. I mentioned it makes you uneasy. I want to talk a little bit about the editing, because we get some cool L cuts where the L cuts, we talked about L cuts in Scott Pilgrim, where the music or the sound extends from one scene to another. We get a handful of those, because when it happens, you see it a lot with like the establishing shots used in this film. But my favorite is when the scene we get after Wendy accuses Jack of hurting Danny, and the music continues into the scene where Jack's walking into the gold room for the first time, and we meet the bartender Lloyd. Those are effective when you use them right, and he being Kubrick used them right. But when it comes to the editing, one of the things that I like that Kubrick uses is what's known as the Kuleshov effect. All right, I'm going to give you guys a boring, brief lesson in film study. Kuleshov, filmmaker, Russia, early 1900s, he found this phenomenon in editing where a viewer will connect two things together if you put the shots in sequential order. So what he does is he takes a shot of a person's eyes, and then he takes a shot of a bowl of soup. And people who are watching that said, oh, well, clearly he's hungry. And then he goes and gets a different group of people, and he takes the same shot of the person's eyes, and then the next shot is an attractive person or a body in a coffin. And everybody came up with a whole different meaning. Oh, well, that guy is clearly lusting after the woman, or he's mourning the death, or whatever. And so it's just this phenomenon that happens. And Kubrick uses that effect with Danny a lot of times in this film. When Danny's at the mirror and he sees the hotel there towards the beginning of the film with the blood and the elevator and stuff. When he passes room 237 and he's staring at it, and then we get a quick cut of the twins, and it goes back to him staring. All right, so he's using that there. Like when he's lying in bed, when he's real scared, and he sees red rum flash on the door, and then it goes away. The twins happens a lot, like when the twins are murdered in the hallway. He turns the corner, come play with us, Danny. Boom, shows the quick picture of them murdered, then that's it. So he just uses that phenomenon really well to help show Danny's not just scared. He's terrified. Like he is. If you saw something like that, you would be absolutely terrified. So we see the magnitude of how scared Danny really is with those. Really cool. I like that he did that. Not a lot of people do that and do it well. You talked about dynamic shots. We do get a lot of just centered basic shots in the beginning, but we do get one nice shot immediately after the opening shot with the helicopter. We get what looks like a dolly shot. It's following Jack Torrance walking to the hotel from left to right, and it looks like a dolly shot, a shot on a track moving with Jack as he enters the hotel. But then it starts following Jack after he speaks with the lady at the front desk, and we never cut. We're still with him. And then we realize, oh no, this is a Steadicam. And then we have a tracking shot that's behind Jack as he walks into to see Stuart Ullman. And from a nerdy camera technique kind of situation, it totally subverts your expectations. And it's just a really refreshing situation to see a filmmaker move the camera in unique ways to make a scene unfold. And I just really like it. It's very noticeable to me. We do need to acknowledge that this is, again, one of those first films to use a Steadicam, and they use it very well with those tracking shots of Danny in the hotel, and also at the conclusion with the maze. I mean, it's like the gold standard of tracking shots when you study film. And, you know, I bet if you did a search for just tracking shots, I'm sure this is going to populate a lot of your search results. We talked about the reflection shot. I thought there's a few of them, but the one we talked about is really nice. We get a lot of crash zooms at the right time. When Danny sees the twins for the first time at the Overlook Hotel, we get a crash zoom. Or when red rum spelled on the mirror, where we notice it spelled out murder, we get a nice crash zoom. One of the more unique shots that you'll see, and few filmmakers ever get a chance to use this, or ever get a chance to use it appropriately, is the camera moving with the action of something. In The Shining, we get it where the camera is moving in motion with the axe when Jack Torrance swings it to destroy the door. It's just a hard technique to use, and there's not really a name for it. It's just moving the camera with the action of the axe. And if you try to force it in there, it's noticeable. But again, like we said, it's just very subtle when they use it. So I'm at 18 too. I'm going to just call it 18. And let's try to take on longevity. You want to take longevity? Or you want me to take that one?
Sure, I'll jump in.
Yeah,
I'm sure you're going to have plenty to say here too, but I'll jump in.
This is where I start fading. I always peak at technique, and then I'm on the downhill slide.
You always have the most notes for technique out of everything, for sure. So longevity, I mean, there's some obvious stuff. There's the pop culture stuff. Everybody knows. I mean, it's all over the place. You see all the references.
Yeah.
You see red rum everywhere. You've all seen the Simpsons Halloween episodes with red rum and the references there. And here's Johnny. Everybody has seen that scene or seen that scene aped. It's been, it's everywhere. The suspense horror film influences this thing has are kind of pervasive. It definitely made an impact there. I mean, I put it in here. It just swings this like absurdly large hammer when it comes to being one of these like classic required viewing. If you're into films, you have to watch it eventually. People always mention it, right? It comes up all the time. It's a favorite of a lot of people. It's got a lot going for it, right? Longevity on this is largely everything. The performances are great. It does not feel right. Sometimes you look at an older film and it feels so out of time because of the technology or this or that. But this doesn't feel like any of that, right? It manages to avoid any major pitfalls with its age, which is also great. I do, and so this is more of like I wonder what, a little bit of an existential crisis. When I look at this and think about where the general audience is now, talk to general audience people, I wonder, and I've got a lot to say on this crisis because I've been in a weird flat spin about it since the thought hit me. But I wonder how much longer films of this ilk are going to have new audiences for.
Yeah.
I don't want to think that the audience for films like this great, is only going to be film nerds in the future. But I think that might be the case before much longer.
Yeah. It's getting into that territory. I mean, think about it. Are your buddies watching Gone with the Wind or Wizard of Oz? It's just, they might have seen it, but they're not watching it. So I think you're right. I think this is headed into that category.
Which is tough. It's tough to think about, because you start thinking about that and you start thinking about films that are like this, the films that fall into that category that might all of a sudden be hitting that cliff. And you start looking at what those ages are, and at the rate the movie industry is being Marvelized, I see that line getting closer to us than it ever has been.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a crazy and concerning thought. But I mean, based on all that, I mean, it's great, right? It holds up. This is my first viewing, and I loved it. It is emotionally effective. I mean, everything works. I also really, really want one of those snowcats, by the way.
Yeah.
Just so bad.
Yeah.
I live in New England. I could definitely use it. So I had 17 for longevity. And I mean,
that's really
I think
good.
Largely because of, I mean, the film itself for sure, but I think it gets a lot of its legs from the influence it's had outside of itself.
Yeah. I'm a little higher. I am at 18. So look at this film. What does an organization like AFI think? First, just let me get my bearings here. So AFI's got it 68 out of 100 for best movie quotes of all time, right? The Here's Johnny, which is on right now. He's saying it right now on my screen.
It'll be on mine momentarily.
Yeah, they've got it they've got it number 25 for the top 100 best villains for Jack Torrance. Okay. They've got it number 25 for best villains. They've got it 29 for top 100 best thrills. So, okay, it's holding some weight. I look at other rankings. Personally, I think from an artistic standpoint, I think it's the best horror film of all time from an artistic standpoint. From a fear standpoint, there are others, but like the art of cinema, of filmmaking, I feel like this is a gold standard for horror. But besides what an organization like AFI thinks, and what I personally think, for longevity, like you said, for longevity, let's consider what our culture thinks. That tracking shot of Danny in the hotel, very well-known scene. All work and no play make Jack a dull boy. All right, that's it. Red rum. Here's Johnny. That whole axe scene, right? They even made a spoof of it in a commercial recently with Bryan Cranston. It might have been like a Mountain Dew commercial or something. Even that shot of the axe busting through the door with the camera holding on Wendy. I mean, that's a classic shot. The twins, seeing those twins, like that. These are all things. Heck, we didn't even mention the big one, like the blood coming down the elevator into the hotel hallway. That's seen a lot. Even things like the carpet's so recognizable. I have a lanyard right here in my room, and the lanyard is made in that same pattern. Austin Draft House in Austin, their carpet leading into one of the lobbies is that carpet. And let's not forget, this film's over 40 years old, and it's still on people's top horror films of all time. So I'm at 18. I think this looks like it's heading that way. The name of the game on this one is splitting it. So if we go with 17,500 for longevity, I'll hit us up with uniqueness real quick, see what you think, and we'll total this bad boy. Adapted screenplay for uniqueness. We say that it's adapted screenplay. It's not as valuable as a film compared to an original screenplay. Okay, this one's slightly different from the novel, sure, but it's still an adapted screenplay. Maybe considering Stephen King doesn't like this version much, and me having seen some of the films of Stephen King's adaptations that he does like, maybe I'll side with Stanley Kubrick on that one.
Yeah, but he doesn't like any of the good ones.
That's it. He doesn't like any. That's what I'm saying. I'll side with Stanley on this one because I don't agree with Stephen King's choices for the good versions of his novels. It still follows the horror. It falls into the horror genre, and it follows the equation that horror films do, and that's okay. I think personally that you should do that in a horror film, but that doesn't make it like overly unique. Where this film has uniqueness is that it's made unlike other horror films, especially at the time when it was made. It's more of that art house type film, but it also translates to non-art house horror film lovers. It falls into a lot of categories, and I find something brand new every single time I watch it. You can say that about a few movies. That's not a unique concept. It does, however, still impact culture today. Ready Player One movie, right? That was a big part of one of those scenes. And it's just really well made film. And those are rare. Those are unique. And it's just not enough to rival the other categories that this film really does excel in. So I'm at 15 when it comes to uniqueness.
So I'm, again, a hair lower than you. I don't think I was higher than you once this time.
I might have $1,000 on each category of just favorite film.
It's possible. Or I might be... You might be first time
viewer
low. Yeah. So I think, obviously the adapted screenplay stuff that plays in. it's not, we talked about already, it's not the first or the last isolation-based horror film. You know, it's not the first to do the cabin in the woods trope. It's not, I mean, I think the majority of the uniqueness on this film comes from the careful way it's presented by Kubrick.
Yeah.
And honestly,
sure.
I don't know, maybe that's not fair of me, but I don't like to reward a film too heavily in too many categories for the same thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right? Like I gave it a bunch of points in technique and for how this is presented. And I give it some points here for sure, because there is stuff here that you don't see, you haven't really even seen as well done or as carefully done since, right? Mm-hmm. So some of that plays in a lot. And there is, I put it in here as a, I don't have a word for it. There's a weird feeling to this film, like a sort of like an intangible sum of its parts that I really dug, that I don't frequently, it's hard for me to find the right word for. I don't frequently feel in a film. It's the effectiveness, and it's almost like I almost had, and this maybe is just because I've had so much pop culture influence to it, I almost had like nostalgia feels in this film, even though I'd never seen it. Right?
That's kind of like the scene where Jack Torrance says, you know, I don't know what it is, but I feel like I've been here my entire life.
Yeah, a little bit like that, right?
That's kind of creepy, man.
Which I hadn't felt like so to separate myself from Jack Torrance, I hadn't felt like I'd seen it before.
We're going there. Why don't you lie down on that couch? Tell me about it.
But I definitely had like familiarity with the film, and not because I had seen little bits of it, but because I think maybe because there are parts of it that feel real in a way that these horror films never do. That could be the descriptor thing, like the atmosphere of the film feels like a real place and real people, and then like you get some crazy paranormal things going on top of that. But I think that all plays in really well. But I think a lot of the main structural things we look at in uniqueness play out in that way, right? It is a previous work. It is based on existing tropes.
Yeah.
It does have, I don't know, I tried really hard. Like, the film feels unique to me. I think this is what I was trying to get at. The film feels unique to me, but I can't really put a finger on like specific reasons why, right? Which is maybe makes me sound like a bad appraiser.
I mean, but there's an intangible to it. Like when you try to rank or rate or value anything, it's like acting. Like, can you explain to me why no, you can't. It's just something you see and you can tell when you see it, right? And that's probably a little bit like this.
There's the thing, it has a feel to it. That's when I say it has like an intangible feel, like there's a feel to this film that is very much its own. Right, it's identifiable. We've talked about this before. Other films where like you can look at the color palette or whatever. You can identify this film, like any scene of this film as being in this film, right? Yeah. Like right now, the scene that's on is and I can't remember his name, but it's the head chef there.
Halloran. Hey, get ready to look at. I just watched the scene you're talking about. Look at Jack's face as he rises up after having killed Halloran. Yeah, and that's acting. Yes. Oh, everything Jack does is great. Look at that face. That face is so creepy. We're at the scene now where Halloran just walked in and he's asking if anybody's here, right? He's about to get it to the chest. You could pull one frame of that, and I could have told you it was from this movie, right? It just looks and feels this movie all the way through. But a lot of the like on paper things on this film, not unique, right? There's a lot of stuff on this film that fall into those categories we look at. You know, if this film hadn't been, let me put it this way, if this film hadn't been great, if the acting had been terrible but the rest of the film was about the same, or if the direction hadn't had so much good foreshadowing but it looked, but the story was the same, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. We would look at this uniqueness in this category and be like, man, this thing's like a 9, right? But it has those things, and so I came in at 14. And I honestly think it's getting, oh yeah, look at his face. Yeah, look at that face, right?
Yeah, there it is.
That is something else.
I worry about him.
It's too good
as a person,
really,
right?
It's really too good. It's too on point. So you're at 14?
I was at 14, yeah. Which, okay. I mean, I talked a whole bunch to separate myself from you by like $1,000.
All right, so I will come down 500. All right, so 14,500. That's going to give us a total of 82,250. That's really good. That's a really good score. 82,250.
Yeah, that is really good.
Where does that put us on the guest list as we compare it to other films brought to us by guests or listeners or even films that you and I have brought like this one?
Well, in great company. I mean, obviously at 82, right?
Yeah.
It's in great company. So it comes in at number 5, which top 5, congratulations.
Finally.
Right above Reservoir Dogs, right below Raiders of the Lost Ark, and pretty tight on money too, right? Like Reservoir Dogs is 81,753.50 because we added the price of what was it? What did we add? I can't remember what that bonus was.
About $350 or something like that.
About $350, yeah.
You know, you look at how close it is to Rocky and Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then you have The Shining coming in at number 5 on the guest list, and they're all really close in every category except one. The music, we were right. The music, it didn't have that punch. I mean, it's the Rocky theme. It's got it higher.
Music is the one.
Raiders
of
the Lost Ark theme. It's got it higher. So that is the thing that has to happen for you to get closer to that perfect valuation.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. Where we'll have like kind of the opposite when we're down a little bit lower on the list. Where we'll have a movie that has like one really high category, and you think, oh, that category is really high, and then it came in low on the list, and then you look and it just didn't have the consistency, right? Like the narrative will be really high, but it'll be kind of just fine across the board otherwise.
Yeah.
And it really goes to show you how complete you need to be to even get into like the top 15, right? Like even the top 20 on our list. I mean, the top 100 on the all-time list for sure. Like you can't miss a beat, right?
Yeah.
Anywhere.
Which again doesn't mean that it's a better film. Like we're not saying that any of these films are better than any other film. We're just saying like as far as it comes to what we feel it takes to have to have a film be the most valuable, it's got to fit in these categories. And some are more valuable than others, right? You're going to take it to the pawn shop and sell it. We're probably going to get more from Rocky and Raiders than we are from The Shining.
And value doesn't
when you think about it that way,
necessarily
it makes sense.
Value doesn't necessarily have to play into how much you like watching it either.
Mm-hmm.
Those are very different things too.
Yeah. Yep. That's a good point. On the definitive list, so our top 25 films that have been brought to us by guests, listeners, things like that, just like the guest list. But we started with the top 25, bunch of different films from different categories from AFI. And as we proceeded through this podcast, some of those films from guests, listeners, and staff here at Film Appraisers have made it onto that list. And if we look at The Shining, we are coming in number 18, just below Blade Runner and just above Reservoir Dogs.
It's very good company.
So if we look at 15 through 20, Raiders coming in 15. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, 16. We actually have 2 tied at 16. Blade Runner, Butch Cassidy. And then The Shining comes in at 18. 19 is Reservoir Dogs, and then Almost Famous at 20. All great company. This is tough territory to be in right here. You make it or break it with just a handful of topics here, or a handful of items.
Yeah, we are in rarefied air for sure.
Okay, we've got a sound bite, and we mentioned it earlier in the episode about Michael, new patron. He's also known as Uthal for maybe not that long in our Discord. I don't know what to say about this, Joe. I'm not super excited about this one. See, this is gonna be
I
good.
am. I can't wait to do that. I can't wait to put you through this.
I don't know what sound clip you brought, but I know what film it is. All right, just go ahead and play it.
Who's there?
Mike Lowry.
Well, how do I know it's Mike Lowry?
'Cause I'm Mike Lowry. Okay, now we ain't got much time.
Hold your badge up to the peephole. I'm not letting you in until you do.
This is one of my favorite get drunk movies. It's such a good drunk movie.
It's going to take that for me to...
You're going to love it. You're going to go back. You're going to think it's...
It's not a bad film. It fits into the category of the films that... So here's what it fits into. Last night, I started watching the first 20 minutes and I turned it off. And I'm going to finish it tonight. But Godzilla vs. Kong. I know what I'm getting. You know, I'm not getting Citizen Kane here. But I know what I want to watch. And it falls in that category. It's just dumb fun. And that's what it is for me.
Yeah, it's exactly what
I can't stand the director.
It is dumb fun.
The director.
And you listen.
I can't stand the director.
I'm gonna have a heart. I'm gonna have a heart to heart with you for a second here, Josh. You need to learn how to have a little more dumb fun. All right.
It's just the director.
This is your dumb fun moment.
It is 100% just the director. I cannot stand his style. He does it over and over and over. There's nothing new or fresh about him, and everything wrong with cinema. And okay,
listen, you're gonna have to get your objective pants on here, brother.
Yeah, I will find my zen before I watch this, and I will be neutral. I will definitely be neutral.
Those objective pants, are those corduroy or jean? I don't remember.
Pants. They are definitely corduroy.
I had a feeling they were like, in my head, your objective pants are like a dark green corduroy with brass buckles.
That's funny. Well, I do live in Texas. So Joe, you last night you had a live stream for the Barrel House. That was really fun. I did get to join it. Friday nights are tough for me, but I did get to join for a little bit. Those are really fun. I really enjoy those.
I think that was my worst one. I'm so tired. I've been working so much. I barely made it through that thing, but they are really fun to do.
Yeah, I like them. A lot of interaction with your listeners, and the topics, kind of like the after show, they can go about anywhere, but we do still go back and center on the whiskey that you have there, and it's just really cool. You get to answer a lot of questions I've noticed from the listeners, regardless of what those questions are, and it'll start a topic, and it'll just I'll
talk about anything during the live streams. I will talk about absolutely anything. Like, there is no subject. I mean, rephrase that. There's pretty much no subject off limit. There's a few things I probably wouldn't want to get into, but for the most part, anything's game.
I mean, we talked MCU, and then we switched it up and talked about the difference between wrestling and wrestling. So
it's true. We did get into wrestling and wrestling, which I'm still not sure about because I don't speak Texan that well, but
we can talk about it later.
We're going to have a little sidebar for that.
Where can the folks find you?
So you can find links to everything Barrel House at barrelhousepodcast.com. That'll have like all the social and the iTunes links and all that stuff. And that's easier than me reading out 100 social media things. So go to barrelhousepodcast.com and click on the things that you're interested in. And that's where I'll be.
Very good. Now I'm going to proceed to read out a bunch of email links. If you would like to find us on Instagram.
We should do this for this show too.
Instagram is at Film Appraisers. Email is filmappraisers@gmail.com. Our website, eargluemedia.com/TFA. You can find everything there. Also, eargluemedia.com/Discord. Go get your personal invite to our Discord server. Go talk to the folks at Cantina Cast, at Petticoats and Poppies, some of the former shows that we've had on there that are either taking a hiatus or we no longer do. Everybody is there from Ear Glue Media. Go join it. Have a good time. I will put up our link to the merchandise for TeePublic. And like we said, patreon.com/filmappraisers will get you to our Patreon page if you would like to subscribe to some bonus content.
I think you'll all really appreciate it. And we really appreciate you being on the Patreon, and I think we're doing a pretty good job providing value for value on Patreon from us. But we always take your input for things you might like to see more of or less of or whatever.
It's more helpful than I think people realize. It really is more helpful.
I think, like, slight sidebar, but also directly related, I don't think people realize how much a little bit of input helps on our side anywhere, whether it's on Patreon or if they were to be awesome and go rate and review the show on iTunes and leave a little input there, like, or email, wherever it might be. A little bit of feedback goes a long ways. It's really super, super helpful, and it's never on deaf ears.
No. What a segue. You are a professional, sir. I will give that to you.
I would not go that far. I just fell right into that backwards.
All right, folks, if you are a patron, please go ahead and stick around. We are going to move on to the after show. For everybody else, we do appreciate you listening to us. Thank you and goodbye.
The Film Appraisers was created by Josh McCrae, produced by Joe Kane and Josh McCrae, graphics by Albert Padilla, and voiceover by Morgan Marshall.
The thoughts, expressions, views, opinions, and the like are those of the guests and the host of the Film Appraisers and do not represent the opinions of any entity associated with the creation or distribution of the films discussed herein.